Yeah, okay, we start. Okay, welcome everyone. Sorry we are a little bit late. Thanks for coming through the rain to this evening. My name is Monica Adams and I welcome you on behalf of the Keilen Collective. Before we start the evening, I have one very practical thing is that we will screen this evening. So if you have objection to that, please let us know. And before I will give the word to Chris Boltjes, who will do the moderation and will also introduce all the people who will speak tonight. I would like to explain a little bit about AANKEILEN, or to address, maybe in English, as you say it, why we did it. Because what we see is that every time there are new people in the series, we started it around almost 2 years now. So in June 2018 was the first time. And it is about this area where we are at this moment. We are in the Keilenpand here. And we started the series because around 2-3 years ago, the municipality quite seriously started with new plans for this area. And in the debates, we saw that people didn't really know how big the whole area actually was. And as you can see, this is the city center of Rotterdam. This whole area is almost as big as the city center. So as if you would walk from the zoo to the Koopgoot. In this area, M4H, it's the idea that basically in 20-30 years there will be a new city area. And of course all the main subjects of today, like energy transition, climate adaptation, but also social issues like having work, and of course also just to make a very nice, healthy living life in 20 years has to land here. At this moment there are not really people who live here. They're mainly makers. That's why it's called Makers District. And our idea is that it's very important that together we really also are involved in discussing what the future of M4H could be. So AANKEILEN is also about that. This is a year ago that we talked with actually all the people around the food garden about what their plans of the future are. At that same time, the spatial framework has been presented by the municipality. And it's really a framework, so it's not fixed in concrete, but it's about the main frame of the roads, where there will be living, housing, and where there will be more working. And very important is that they said, well, we want to have, there are 8 guiding principles of sustainable development. And what it means is that as a main motto, they said the circularity has to be a very, the main subject in this area. And they, so with all the principles, collectivity as a basis for circularity is the main theme. And what we did for this series, because every time with AANKEILEN we try to pick another subject to look at it in different ways, is to take the principle that the area M4H is an experimental area. So there is room to do things that are new or are not done before. And to connect it to food, because in this area also there is still a very big fruit terminal alongside our building actually, but food is a very main subject. So to connect that together and to look at food from really different ways. Now, today is the 3rd evening, And yeah, we are going to talk about the spatial exploration of food. So I'm quite curious what tonight will bring. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Monica, for this introduction. I will briefly talk to you through the program tonight. Well, as Monica said, we had this is the third night on food, and well, the first evening we talked about the social aspects of food, and not only the production, but really the social. What does food mean? What does it bring us? What does it bring a community? And how can it bring people together, actually? So we saw some local social initiatives in the neighborhoods. And the second evening, last week, was more about the production of food on a regional scale. We had a presentation from Maarten, who's also now with us, about from his company, Rechtstreeks, to talk about a different way of producing food and also acquiring food, actually. How do we get our food, and what's the role of a supermarket? Someone from Albert Heijn was here, so we explored that, and today it's about well, maybe also about urban farming. What is that? And basically the question that we have is, should and could we integrate this into the built environment? So this production of food, and what does it mean? What does it mean spatially? But can it also mean something socially? Because the place we are here is an important place in the city, because it's one of the last places which is really close to the city, of the old harbor still. There's harbor activity, but it's also really close to these neighborhoods, Bosbolder, Tussendijken, where many people live with social problems or financial problems. So can this transition of this MVH also mean something in that? So that is also something that we constantly think about and try to ask these questions of the people who come to speak here. One last thought of mine that I would like to start the evening with: if I think of farming and sort of the production of food, I grew up in a small village in Groningen. I think of a bird, the skylark. I like it very much. It's a small bird that flies quite high above the fields. It's really part of the cultural landscape, and there's this sort of continuous song. Whenever I hear it, I think of farming. That's my sort of memory of farming. I live now in Delft. I have three daughters, young daughters, and they, well, of course, we live quite near Pijnacker, where there's a lot of greenhouses. So they can read in their bed with the light of the greenhouses. So I was thinking maybe for them that's their memory of farming. So maybe that's a question for all of us. What's your memory of farming, and how can it be different? That's was my sort of the question I had. But without further ado, I think we should go to the first speaker, because we're already started a bit late. So Jago van Bergen from Bergen Kolpa Architects. Maybe you could come forward and briefly introduce yourself and what you do, and then we start your presentation. Yes, that'd be very nice. Yes, I think that would be nice. Yeah.
And there was a pointer for the slides.
Okay, well, my name you know already. Jago van Bergen, partner architect of Van Bergen Kolpa Architects. We are an office in Rotterdam. And I just start with the presentation, because in the presentation is the introduction. So, and actually I wanted to show you a couple of things, but I introduce myself a bit, the office, how we work. What we understand as, let's say, one of the main objectives of our firm is architecture for food. And the connection, let's say, with the question of tonight, looking for built examples of production and in the cities. I want to talk a little bit further about vertical farming, because this is a kind of quite a new technology which I think will have a deep impact on the cities of the coming cities, or the cities already are being influenced by it. And I want to finalize with Agrotopia, which is a project which is now under construction, and it shows a bit how, let's say, architecture for food gets realized. Our firm is based in Rotterdam. It's quite simple. I have a partnership with Evert Kolpa. We run an office around 10 people since 2000. So this is our 20th anniversary this year. And we work as a design studio. That's our main, let's say, skill. We are focusing very much on realizing buildings. And if it needs to take that, we also do the research for this, because let's say a lot of the projects that we do are a bit on the innovative side, where we try to find out new things. We're located in the city center of Rotterdam. We love the city. We are very much orientated on the city, but we're also part of a larger whole, which is, let's say, in terms of food, called the Green Port, of one of the Green Ports of the Netherlands. Basically, about the biggest scale of horticultural development is taking place here, including knowledge, training, economy, and so forth. So this is the global center of horticulture, actually. So if we talk about food, then I think I want to make the first remark that we actually at least have to look at this scale first, also to be relevant again then for the M4H area. Let's say what we do in the office, that we combine actually those knowledge fields. So we are from the city, but we also from that area around. And let's say, actually next to me is Michele, who's gonna have a little story, but we therefore also very often work together with, for instance, Wageningen University on different topics. Wageningen University is big, so there's a lot of disciplines in it, but with a lot of disciplines we work together, as an example of, let's say, cooperations. So we also bring, let's say, the parties of the city and the land, or the countryside, as you want to call it. The question is whether you can call it the countryside, the Green Port, together. And basically, this is sort of our business case. But also we extended it into, let's say, the topic of architecture of food. It started, or briefly, it started a bit also with this research that we conducted for the Ministry of Economy and Agriculture in, I think it was 2014, also with Wageningen together. And let's say, we discovered that there is a couple of different typologies that are about urban agriculture. And mainly this research was about, the ministry was puzzled, like we heard something, or there's something like urban agriculture, what is it? Can you explain to us? And can you research what is actually, what kind of economic importance can it have in the future? So we distinguished a couple of typologies, starting from the city edges to the city. And today I want to focus with you primarily on this urban agriculture and food production in and around buildings. Actually, I go way back now. This is one of our first actually built projects 20 years ago. It was for the Galerie on the Rotte, but also by then we were already looking for, okay, what can you do if you want to integrate food production in the city? It was more starting from a joke, but in the end it got serious. We did a floating salad restaurant with its own salad production, watercress, in the sweet water of the Rotte, opposite of the dock along the Main, so opposite of the restaurant. And actually, later we found out that this is a Chinese restaurant, so we were in the middle, and we got visitors from both sides. Actually, this is quite funny, because now this was right after it got executed, and actually I see it now again. This is green, but after a couple of weeks it was turned around, because the whole river was then grown, and all the ducks ate the watergrass. So there was more to incorporate, let's say, than we realized, than just humans. Also nature and ecology and so forth is involved. But let's say, basically, this is what we do every time we think about, let's say, landscape and what a water landscape can bring, what it can produce, and how economy, in this case, a salad bar, a salad restaurant, how they can work together and become sort of new reality for the city. A couple of years later, we executed this project in Hoogvliet. We developed in a post-war garden city a series of communities for social housing, for Vestia, and we used, let's say, the language of the post-war city with sort of small-scale stamps for 10 families, 10 communities with their own food production. So the facades are literally grown with climbing fruit production, and this was decided and combined with the visitors, or the inhabitant itself, and a hovenier who realized it and give lessons, let's say, to. So it was, let's say, apart from a nice green facade, also a social way of getting people together. This works actually very well because people were indeed meeting here. We thought about food, but in the end it was also in the beginning of the project about problems like leaking houses and so forth. So immediately the social aspect worked very well, and they know how to find the housing corporation for other problems than just the food. So let's say that works quite well. Another typology, this was low rise. The high rise is that we're executing right now in Rotterdam in the city center near het Landje. It's a tower for a high-rise tower for families. We're going to introduce actually a new typology in the city. Let's say a single family house. So you have to understand this is a triplex with let's say a lot of green around. And that's why I show it, because we're going to plant it with fruit trees. So this will be more on an informal way. Also a regular housing typology combined with food production, but then for the inhabitants itself. These stacked family houses have, let's say, a back garden, as you know it, the typical Dutch typology. You have in-between houses and corner houses, and also a front door along a small street, which cuts through the building 4 times above each other. If you're interested, in March, within a month, it's for sale on the housing market in the World Trade Center. It's nice to live there in the city center. Another typology which goes more to the hardcore food production or the hardcore food logistics is for Van Gelder Groente en Fruit. This is actually the biggest fresh vegetable and fruit distributor of the Netherlands. They're actually situated in the Greenwood, but then the south, near Barendrecht. And this guy is a family business that got a bit out of control. He now has a turnover of 53 million a year, and he delivers to the parliament, Dutch parliament, and all the restaurants. If you see this logo and you are living in Rotterdam, you see it everywhere on every street corner in the morning, being delivered to horeca and so forth. And he has an assortment that goes from typical Dutch to all the tropical and Mediterranean fruits, vegetables, and so forth. So and from quite a high quality. So he needs for his customers, and that's actually the reason why we got involved with him, to build his new headquarters in Barendrecht. He wants also to show the type of food he produces in its origin, so where it's coming from. So if you have a specific zest lemon, he wants to show the zest lemon tree to this cook who wants to cook with it. So the experience of the food goes further than just the food on the plate. For him, it's more also connection to where it's coming from. That makes it very interesting. So a headquarter with samples of food production. Let's say you get received by kind of a valley of tastes, where cooking will take place along this terraced valley. And also, let's say, employees, of course, can enjoy this area. And on the roof, so here you have the valley on the roof, because it's a building of around 30,000 square meters. So this is around 2 hectares of greenhouse horticulture in different climates, from moderate to tropical. Let's say it gives an extra, of course, input on his sale. Another group of people, we go a bit outside of the Netherlands, in Belgium, in Brussels, abattoir. They are actually the oldest meat market of Brussels, and they're in the middle of the city center of Brussels. And they actually, here you can see the old market, the meat market. They're redeveloping actually the whole area around it, and still want to keep the meat industry in the city center. That's quite something, because normally these kind of activities are immediately placed outside, even beyond M4H, let's say. These kind of things are tucked away in industrial areas, but they want to keep it in the city center, actually for social reasons, for economic reasons. They want to keep this into the city. Let's say the question was about this building. So it's called ateliers, basically spaces where meat gets cut to your pork chop, or your sausage is being made. So new building that houses in the plinth this meat, let's say, industry. And also at the same time they want to resolve, of course, like every market has, a parking problem. But what is also interesting about this is that they want to connect different kind of new development buildings to a circular approach in order to sort of balance each other, but also to benefit each other from residual heat, from electricity, and so forth. And the funny thing is that this building, which has the, as I said, on the ground floor, the meat production and parking on top of it, they're gonna project a swimming pool on top, because with the residual heat from the cooling system, they can heat the pool. So you can see also that with food production or food handling or food logistics comes unexpected combinations that can stack to some kind of a sort of urban, well, almost hamburger type of building. Well, this is what you see. So this is our design entry for it. And so, well, we see the meat ateliers, the parking, and the swimming pool on top. Part of it, and that is interesting about what these kind of buildings make them different from typical food buildings, is that the logistics part, of course, comes with a lot of transportation. And to be able to still operate in the city, you have to shut off noise and a nuisance. So we developed this typology based on a big hall inside where all the traffic can take place, loading and unloading. Also, meat has to be transported in a cool environment, in a clean environment. So here, by just closing simple 2 doors, you can shut off the, let's say, the noise and keep the climate controlled for, let's say, this logistical part from unloading the truck into the atelier. It's very important if you think about designing food buildings. Climate is a key thing, and I come to that later as well again. A bit further away again, Doha, Qatar. There we are involved with Hassad Foods. They're like the Unilever of Qatar. But the problem of Qatar is that it's one big desert, so they don't have any food production themselves. These people are well known on internet for like land grabbers. So Hassad Food acquires a lot of land, for instance, in Australia, Brazil to make coffee, in Sudan to grow their sprouts, and import that uniquely for the Qatari people. So let's say it's a company that, let's say, is a private owner of large parts of the world where food is produced, and it's has a fence around it, and it's importing that. And they wanted to show, that was the question to us, they wanted to show these kind of different landscapes to the people of Qatar. So they want to have an expo. But we said, well, if you do it smarter, let's make then an expo which actually can produce also in your desert climate in a good way, in a sustainable way. So we developed, let's say you have to imagine it's always 40 degrees and a humidity of like 85 to 90% there. So it's almost inhumane to work there. And you can imagine that plants hardly grow there. The soil is completely salted, so there's hardly any sweet water. So we developed actually a typology on which we use seawater as a cooling element, take hot air in, this condensates, so we can tap off sweet water to irrigate the crop and cool at the same time, of course, the air. One of the locations was situated in an old quarry, so we could use the, let's say, terraced landscape and put a dome over it and control the climate and at the same time get the right amount of sweet water. Another typology that we looked with them is into more too close to the city center, where it is more acting like a market, but based on the same principles. So let's say food buildings and their clients or the people that are behind it, let's say constantly are now, as we get to know them more and more better, looking for new solutions. Also COFCO, that's kind of the Unilever of China. Only the unique thing about COFCO is that they also are one of the biggest real estate developers of China. And that's sort of halfway the conversations that we had with them we found out about, because we thought we were invited to design a building for them, but they came actually with a question for a whole food valley or city for 60,000 inhabitants. So we designed a city based on all the principles probably that you have seen also in the previous lecture last week. Different kind of, really hardcore production, agriculture, more ecological agriculture and urban farming agriculture, surrounded by apartment development of around houses development of 60,000 people. The new city around Beijing, this is now what it looked like. This is, so they started in the heart. That's the right thing to do always. And one of the buildings is and indeed the entrance building that we designed. And let's say interesting about that is that we managed to get a sort of urban scale into the regular greenhouse production thing. So let's say it has a central, almost monumental scale of vertical food production, and around it the more regular types of production. If we talk about food and about M4A, I think also we need to see it, as I said, in a bit more larger perspective. You showed a diagram, Monica, of MVH relating to the city center of Rotterdam. I think if you talk about food, I think you need to scale up your perspective. Simply because all the knowledge about food, from low-tech to high-tech, is concentrated globally almost in this area. It involves not only the, let's say, horticulture industry around it, but also the harbor. And these are strategies that we draw for the province of South of Holland, for instance, how to work in the future with, let's say, the whole horticulture industry when they go off the gas, for instance. Like all the houses are now have to go, but also this kind of activity. So what kind of connection do you have to make with, let's say, the harbor, for instance, but also with, let's say, the training center, so the education. So what kind of network in Orange? TU Delft, the Horticampus on Oostland, the Horticampus on Westland, but also M4H, which could be like a sort of maker's knowledge center that could become a part of this network, where, let's say, you act as a creative brain or creative inputter and can indeed test in your proefvelden or test fields new inventions on food production. So I think if you think about food production here or about innovation, I think you have to think in this, at least in this scale. And not without any reason, because this is really a global center. And it's not without any reason that, let's say, we reach with our projects up to in China, because they want to know it. Come to back to it later, what we're doing here. I want to touch a bit upon vertical farming, because that's pretty new. This is what we know, horizontal farming. Out in the country, this is a map of the world, and basically the largest fields are actually supporting metropolitan areas. So it's a bit strange, actually, this moving around of food. Why can't we do it in the city itself? That's the thought of vertical farming. So closer to the urban area, closer to the consumer, shorter distances. And let's say this can happen due to major innovations that are now taking place on the field of urban vertical farming. Basically, you stack your crop in multiple layers, and you can do that fully automatic till more, let's say, manual installations, till small containers. This is an example. Actually, it also immediately involves your building structure. So actually, you make a warehouse system where you breed your plants in. This is the green cube of Logix. This is a fully automated warehouse system. So you just type in your, if you want to have a certain crop, and after a few rotations of a couple of weeks, it comes out and you can harvest it. And interesting, of course, for architecture or for an architect is that you start to completely think a way around. Normally you build a building and then you put the furniture in it, but now actually the furniture becomes the building, and you just have to wrap a raincoat over it. This is a more manual, a bit clumsy way, aero farms in the United States. This is a very intelligent one. If you talk about social and also employment, this is in Jackson Hole in America. It's one of the ski resorts of America, quite distant from food production. So they started to make their food themselves. Actually, a woman architect started this initiative to develop, because her son is autistic and he needs she wanted to find a job for him, and a repetitive doing the thing over and over again, which is actually horticulture, could be one of the things that worked for him. And actually, that's the starting point of a building. It's built around actually a parking, so it's taking a sort of residual place in the city. It's only a building of, I believe, 60 meters wide and 25 meters high as a slab, 40 meters long. And it's full of automated systems. And this is a kind of a hybrid, so it uses LED lights and daylight at the same time. And of course, vertical farming in boxes means that you can make the perfect growing conditions within a small space. The thing about vertical farming is that it acts completely different than we know of. And these are actually a couple of diagrams that show vertical farming in relation to normal horizontal greenhouse horticulture. Is that in terms of energy, water, and nutrients, it's almost nothing of regular greenhouse production. So it's almost, 5 or less % of what it's used. So you have to imagine that you only have used for that same tomato only 5% of the water that is now involved. That's an incredible step forward. But also things are completely going out of control. So if, for instance, electricity, it's twice as much that it needs, because it's completely shut off of daylight and working fully on LED light. Of course, it has a tremendous take on the land use. So you only have 25% of your land use. If you stack it in 20 layers, for instance. But then the costs are enormous. So you have to, a regular greenhouse is around, an expensive one is already around 200 euros a square meter, and this is around 1300. So things are still to be researched. These are the data from the first pilots that are made. But things are developing fast. For instance, the produce. So if you not have 1 or 2 crops circles a year, but around 20, you can imagine that your revenue is completely different. And the question is how we can integrate all these flows that are going in a different way with vertical farming with the city. For instance, the topic that we did for vertical farming on Rijnwaard is that it should be combined with a huge battery because, let's say, sustainable energy doesn't come in a constant flow. The wind is there or the sun is there and sometimes not, so you need a huge battery. Well, these kind of things need to be invented to make vertical farming, for instance, possible in the city. But also what comes out of it. So not only what goes into it, but what goes out of it. It is quite a large variety. You can go for the regular perfect crop of lettuce and have it in a large amount. But you can also go for specialties because you can control the climate in a perfect way. And you can even customize it in such way. For instance, farmers cut and grow do it grow in trays, and the trays fit perfectly on the tabletop of the cook in the restaurant. So you have, let's say, a direct connection of production to the end consumer, which is a completely new way of thinking about food. Because, well, you know, Holland is about quantity and not about quality, and this is the other way around. Spatially, we looked at which a bit deeper in it. It goes very much about sort of building blocks that you can, let's say, start to combine for the city in different topologies, horizontal or stacked, of course, and get an enormous, let's say, winst on land use, of course. As I said, it is in a very big development. This is one of the in-between steps that we are now trying to realize in Rijnwaard. But I think MVH is also a very interesting location to think in a completely different way about this, more as a testing, let's say, task. We're very happy that we just was announced that the MBO also discovered that vertical farming is really something that should be brought further. The colleague of, well, you see actually here, your colleague Marcel is leading this. So the MBO granted us a huge influx of money to continue this further. So the coming 4 years we'll be probably talking a bit more about this. And I think MH4 could be a very good test location also for these kind of things. And also in, as I said, in other countries, they're really looking for this kind of knowledge. So this is in China again. We met a year ago with this client. We designed a building for the mayor of Hangshui. And actually vertical farming, as you can see, is an important pillar of this project, with a horticultural center on top and food production also and a roof terrace. We called it the treasure box. Let's say this is, let's say, the new technique for the future. And it goes there very quick. I've never presented such an ugly picture, but I had to convince you this is actually the foundation of the corrugated facade. So within a year, and that's how fast it goes in China, they are convinced, because that's most of the important thing, and then they just start to build it. So also the speed in which it goes and the hunger, let's say, for our knowledge and innovation goes quick. Also in Belgium, this is the LOT project, Aquatopia. They're a little bit slower, although they started with a lot of preparations. It's taking a bit longer. In essence, it's about 1 hectare of greenhouse and vegetable research center, but then on top of the roof of the vegetable auction market. So Roeselare, that is where the project is located, sort of the Naaldwijk of Belgium. Let's say where all the food, vegetable production gets distributed. And on top of this auction, we're building actually a food production and research center. It's accessible for public, so there's 2 heads or fronts. One is the public side with facilities for offices, convention, restaurants, and so forth, and another side related to the ring as a vertical greenhouse with tests for 12 meter high for vertical solutions and horizontal part in between it in different climates. And we use actually just a regular greenhouse and just tweak it a bit so it becomes architecture, let's say. So we simply continue the roof over the facades, benefiting from, let's say, sort of aircare model where we can orchestrate the views a bit better and also the sun screening in a good way. But also this project is very much connected to its surroundings. So let's say if you talk about food production in the city, you have to think on, as well as this level, how you can connect it in a circular way to other streams that are taking place. So for instance, we're using the residual heat of garbage incinerator that is located right next to the project. So it's getting heated by that. And of course, the project itself delivers a lot of biomass that can be used also in this incinerator. And of course, we exchange knowledge with the city inhabitants, and the city inhabitants can put their questions about what type of food they need back into this research facility. So it's also an educational center. So there's, let's say, soft circularity and hardcore, let's say, circularity involved in terms of energy and water. On the scale of the building itself, it's completely circular. So there's no drip of water that's being spoiled. Everything is re-cleaned and so forth in all kinds of ways. And what is interesting also about it is that you build on an industrial scale, but you start to think about other ways of making it publicly accessible, let's say into an architectural issue. So for instance, we use a sort of kind of low-tech computer floor of concrete tiles in which a large amount of the ducting will be hidden so that the people can unobstructedly walk around in the building. This is how far we get. So you also start to think with this architectural food typologies about completely different kind of scale of let's say, building. So it's really an industrial scale. These are the water tanks that will support the 12 meter high greenhouse. And this is the entrance stair. This is how far we roughly are now, waiting for the steel structure to next month to start. And if we go up the stairs, you will end in this public area. It's sort of mini square, let's say, where we call it the urban agricultural square, where this knowledge can be exchanged, where you can see samples of the crops, where we have convention centers and training centers and so forth. There's a floor plan, you go up, you have a sort of small village, urban agriculture village, then the big testing facilities, around 5,000, half an hectare of testing facilities in different climates with fruit vegetables and leafy vegetables, technical space, and then the 12 meter high testing facility for vertical farming. Corridors, completely unobstructed, so all the ducting is under the floor. So children can enjoy and see and learn from what is happening. Different types of crops grown under LED, daylight, and so forth. And accumulating in this 12 meter high sort of urban agricultural church, 12 meter high along the center, the ring road of Roeselare, where we will be having different vertical farm solutions under daylight. So this, let's say, could also be sort of sample of how you can build against buildings, let's say, as a facade in the future in the city. So we also designed it in such a way that you have sort of testing for solutions of food buildings in the city in terms of typology and in terms of architectural solutions. As you can see here, so this is 12 literally sitting on its water storage. So we have around 2,000 cubic meters of water that we need for the whole facility. And actually the facade is designed in such a way that you can, by doing this, can unobstructedly, without reflection, can look inside. And actually this is then matte glass, so that distributes the daylight deep into the building. So by simply tweaking a standard system and applying it in a different way, it becomes, let's say, more architectonical and less than standard, and could become or get a place in the city. But it also, let's say, is an improvement of the standard flat facade. And if you talk about the city, you also have to think about the night, because city is day and night. And I think that is what architecture for food could deliver in the future for food production in the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Jago. Thank you for your story. Are there questions already from the? Yeah.
Yeah, hi. Well, I really like your vertical farming buildings and the idea about it. I just wonder. I have a question about one of your first projects you talked about, the one in Brussels, where the meat production would be have a very big central part in the city center. We all know in the Netherlands is a big problem now with farmers, and meat production should go low. So I wonder, why are they investing in the middle of the city center of Brussels, kind of the example for Europe, capital of Europe, in a big meat distribution center?
Nevertheless, it's a good question. So what happens? Why food or why meat? But the abattoir sees it as that they're in transition. Actually, the meat market has a huge basement where the meat was cooled in the old days. So it was sold under this big canopy and kept cold in the basement, and it's still there. It was a huge party center up till 5 years ago, but now they're growing mushrooms there. So they're investing also in the new economy and the new nutritions that will eventually replace meat. So also the way we designed
a big investment, I guess, for
that's the way that we designed the building also in such a way that it can be part of this transition. Simply the structure, I didn't tell it in detail, but is an open structure that can be filled in. But basically for every type of food production, you need different kind of climatization. It can be done very simply with sandwich panels. So the meat production today, maybe it will be a vegetable burger tomorrow that will be produced in there. So they see their role much more as an economy, an market for new economy and a market for social interaction. It's in the middle of Molenbeek, actually. So, well, you know everything about this. It's a very diverse, and it's also a global melting pot of all kinds of cultures. And they see their task as also, because they love meat, of course, all the different cultures around the world, that this habit can be transformed, that they can also become a part of this transition, taking their food cultures also on the level of meat into a next future. So it's a building it's an area in transition and a building meant to transition, and that's also why I wanted to show it tonight, because I think this is also for M4H and thing to think about, that you were not a sort of freezed moment in time, but that you have to think about how you can constantly transform, let's say, because the developments go very quick at this moment in terms of food. Yeah. 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 To be honest, the break-even point, these kind of things, I'm not that deep into it. But I can assure you that there's a long way to go. this is really in the level of test. Well, I think one of the issues also not only improving in the coming research that we're going to do the coming years on the level of output, how you can improve that, but also how you can bring down the costs will be definitely an issue to get to a break-even point. But this is far, and this is
the moment
yeah.
the products still are quite exclusive, quite expensive. So maybe that's something, the social aspect. Seems good to keep that in mind before afterwards, after the talk. I think we would continue on that a bit, how we can develop that and be a bit more exclusive. So that's thank you very much. Michele, would you like to step forward?
Hello, hi. I am a researcher at Wageningen University. Okay. I am a researcher at Wageningen University, and I have been working on vertical farming over the course of the last 2 years in several projects. I was doing my internship in ROEX. I've been doing some research on modeling the production of lettuce in vertical farms, and I've been helping Leo Marcellis in writing a chapter for a book called Plant Factories with Artificial Light, written by Toyoki Kozai, one of the famous figures of the scene of vertical farming. And so yeah, I'm very passionate. Currently, I'm not really working on vertical farming. I am working with the company Ferrero and Wageningen on the development of a climate chamber to grow hazelnut in a controlled environment. So still crazy project about controlled environment, but not vertical farming. Yeah, let's start. Let's start with the question, what is vertical farming? So unfortunately, is a very confused situation now, because we are talking about a new sector, relatively new sector, and according to the background of the speakers and the opinion, you have different way to say the same thing, and sometimes that's a problem because it makes very difficult to finish what you start, like a building. And this is an attempt to define what is vertical farming. So we can say that it's a novel technology with multiple tires that use hydroponic, with a control environment, artificial lighting, and so on. But are all those statements true? Vertical farming, is vertical farming really so new? No, we have now the fourth wave of vertical farming. And every time there is a change in technology, lighting technology, we see someone thinking about vertical farming. And for example, in Israel, they were already doing some cultivation in the 80s. Multiple tires, yes, but also we see this concept, and sometimes we see also vertical farming called things that are not really vertically in the sense that they are stacked, but maybe they are rooftop, no? And you can say, well, it's vertical because it's zero, it's not using land, but it's on top of a building. Control environment, most of the time, yes, but sometimes you see a gradient of control, and sometimes no control at all. And this is definitely vertical farming, but there is no control over an environment. Again, hydroponic, we see, yes, mainly hydroponic, but this company, Aerofarms, use aeroponics. There are companies that use different kind of, no one, of course, is doing that in soil, but they are using different kind of hydroponics, so all different subgroups, so it's difficult to find a common umbrella term. So we attempt to do that, but we gave a very broad and loose definition. So to try to be as inclusive as possible. So we say that cultivation system in buildings without the direct use of solar light. So for this reason, we exclude rooftop greenhouses and multiple stake layers, single layers, small, medium, large. So this is the definition that we gave for the European scene currently, the present status. So in Europe, the kind of vertical farm that we saw according to our definition are large-scale production system This is John Food Company. That is in UK. Or this is a container farm that's also very popular. Also, IKEA is testing this concept in Malmo, and in-store farms. In-farm is probably the most famous one in this kind of vertical farm. And then smaller kind, but still, I would say vertical, are the appliance farm. And these are more toys, fancy toys, but still, they play a role that is, besides food production, more about education, entertainment. Why vertical farming? So there are reasons. We have been already talking about that a bit, but there are reasons for. There are some needs. There is increasing demand of high quality, fresh, local food with some sustainable story behind. The population is getting old, and the population that is doing agriculture is getting old, and there is not a real change of the among the young people. Indeed, if you want a job, go to study greenhouse horticulture. There is a lot of demand and lack of students, and then the opportunities to grow food in urban areas are very limited. It has many advantages: high yield, high quality, and I have to read them because I never remember. If you think about it, you can always find good aspects of vertical farming, but there are also many negative aspects that has been already mentioned. The cost is very high because the use of electricity is very high, and also the sustainability sometimes is sort of assumed, or like you say, yeah, it's sustainable, it's green, it's good, so it's gonna make your neighbor better. Not always. So it's difficult. We see a difficulty on understanding if vertical farming is sustainable, not just because the definition of sustainability is complex, but also because the definition of vertical farming is difficult. Crop choice, mainly we see these are the kind of crops that are currently researched in Signify Research Lab. Leafy greens are the dominant crops that we see among the edible. Lettuce, leafy, herbs, microgreens, edible flowers, and small berries that are not leafy greens, but yeah, these are the one that looks like more to food. But also, yeah, this is food as well, but is more to increase the quality of your diet than to give actually calories and substance. These are example of product that we find in New York City. These is on the actually in California. This is not a vertical farm according to our definition, but is a rooftop greenhouse. So there are already companies that are on the market that are trying to make a viable company. Many have been failing, some are struggling, and few are turning some profits. The crop choice is not limited just to leafy greens and edible. There is a big wave around cannabis for medical and enjoyment. Then vertical farming is also used in different ways by growers of the horticultural industry. For example, to produce seedlings and then transfer them in the greenhouse, or to have special floral induction. It depends. Like growers can be very creative, and they really know how to add value to their product. There is research on GMO to see how we can develop new cultivars that fits in this new kind of agriculture. Because one of the reasons that we are not yet very efficient in doing vertical farm is that we are using crops that have been selected for open field. So and most of them have been appearing in the first Green Revolution, and the breeding was all done according to a completely different environment than the one we are using now. So maybe smaller tomatoes that can also be obtained with traditional breeding could make really a difference. And then medical, high-value crops are also commonly found in vertical farms. So maybe this could be something for this Rotterdam area, because if you have traditional herbs of not Western medicine, or things like that could also help the social aspect and have a reason for an high cost, because these things cost a lot also there in these non-Western places. And sustainability, yeah. Before talking about sustainability, it's also interesting to think about what are the inputs and what are the outputs. So you have cultivation hardware. I define that like everything that has to do with building and cultivating something, like the vertical farm itself and the hydroponic beds. Then carbon dioxide as an input, water, energy, nutrients, and of course the workforce. The output is the harvest. You have organic waste, nutrients, heat, water, oxygen. The part of the cultivation hardware that is not disposable. And also I was in doubt to include that, but this is an important output because also of the value, and there are also ethical questions around this, and again a social justice and social sustainability aspect related to this output of a vertical farm, because often many of these companies want to keep the property and hide the well, reasonably they build a business, they build the business models around the knowledge they create out of data, they don't want disclosure of the data. So basically since these are the most famous, the most strong vertical farms that we see nowadays, it seems that there is a technocracy building, and technocracy is sometimes creating injustice. Defining sustainability is very difficult. This is a definition that is very limited, but still at least it's three-dimensional, include people, profit, planet. And for a vertical farm, for now, it's just the P of paying the bill. And the environmental sustainability has many points in favor. So we have no pesticide, the water use efficiency extremely high, land use is limited, 0 food miles, reduced food waste, longer shelf life. But the energy required to produce in a vertical farm is much, much higher than the one you need in a regular greenhouse. Please.
What are you making comparisons against traditional agriculture or against greenhouses? What is the comparison?
So in this case, against everything else that is not vertical farming. So also this is both traditional and greenhouse. This one specifically is against greenhouse. And the 60% of the energy is still relying on fossil fuels. So if you use a lot of energy to produce food, it's expensive. That's fine. We can use subsidies, but we cannot say that it's sustainable. And the building material has to be considered when you do your sustainability considerations. The cultivator material is not much, but is disposable and is rock wool and is probably dangerous for the people. Is not yet proven, so that we cannot say that. We may see some change in regulation in the coming years, but it's disposable and it takes a lot of energy to be produced. It's basically making sugar. It's like you're basically making wool out of rock. You are heating up rock, and it takes a lot of energy, carbon dioxide also. The true nutrient use is very limited, but still is relying, most of the vertical farming are relying of nutrients that have been mined somewhere. So we are still relying on a system that is not completely sustainable. The fertilizer, yeah. So I'm not naive and utopian. I will always be like this, but it's still a not renewable resource, fertilizer. So they will finish. And also there is a good news, but it's not completely good, because LED light is gonna increase in efficiency, but not forever. So now we're in a very nice moment of the curve. So we're gonna have really increasing efficiency over the next years, but at a certain point it will reach like physical limits. At 4.7 5, somewhere here, it will stop. So, and if you see the numbers still, even with this more or less double efficiency, you are not able to have a sustainable product and also economically really viable. So you have to act elsewhere in the efficiency, for example, the heating system, the cooling system, and the labor. So you can still make it viable, but the people that rely just on the fact that LED are becoming more efficient, well, they're not considering that every growth reach a plateau, as they say. And this is a nice publication of a social scientist that have been working and studying the New York urban agriculture scene. And if you want to have this urban agriculture that makes the situation, the social, that brings social justice, well, yeah, I'm saying this because I really like the tech part of this. I'm really a nerd on these kind of things, but I don't like when they say, yeah, okay, yeah, well, urban farming is good for the communities and so on. Yes, but under certain circumstances, when the aim of the company is explicitly to target the structural injustice. So sometimes high-tech recreate the socioeconomic distortion that create marginalized communities. So I'm not, because technology is a powerful tool that can be used for the good and for the bad. So what I say, I don't want to demonize technology. There are good examples, but it should be carefully taught when you are trying to apply technology everywhere. Because now we see the same with the internet revolution. It's now creating a lot of problem, but at the beginning it was like a sort of, yeah, it's gonna be fine, it's gonna be amazing, it's gonna be utopian. And now it's dystopian. So we should be careful about how we use this technology. Very expensive. This is very expensive, but so this is 3 times the actual cost of organic basil in New York. This is the same price of pesto. Pesto in New York in Whole Food is between $20 per kilo and 40. So here we are still there. So I don't know how, but they managed to do it. This is very cool. This is ugly greens. So they're using probably things that normally lettuce that normally wouldn't fit in the market, in the supermarket, but they since they don't rely on a regular supply chain, they can also include them, and they manage to have quite cheap prices. So we are still dealing with a premium product that is very nice, but again, is justice, or we are feeding the people with a Tesla? So it's you know, I really want that this technology can help, but how? Yeah, it's really as difficult as making the numbers of the business model. Another common thing that is often taught that the people like, when you go to these conferences and when you go to the VC, when you see these entrepreneurs, they all talk about LED. But if you've been working in a vertical farming, you know that technology you can buy, it's an asset, done. But then to make a viable business, you need efficient operations. And that's not, and that's something you have to develop there, or you have to think carefully with someone that is really an expert on that. So what we need in the vertical farming sector to make it promise, to make the promise become reality. So smart business model. So it's not just about selling greens on a premium price. Maybe you can do like in-farm that they sell also the entertainment. So you go to the supermarket to see the vertical farm. So the lettuce is expensive, but the people go to the supermarket and buy more of the rest. So this is a smart business model. Or like you use your vertical farm to grow like the first part of the production. So you have 100% germination, super strong seedlings, and then you move them to the open field. Smart idea and can bring success. Socially responsible business model. So what do we do with the people? Should we follow the technocratic dream of removing the labor from the fabric, then we don't have labor for anyone. So, do we have a plan to give labor to the people when we are removing labor? For example, now we just say that in the horticultural business there is a shortage of work, so in that case it's not really a problem. But there are many issues related to making a socially responsible business. Thinking about alternative substrates, as said, like rock wool is very polluting. Thinking about sustainable building material, energy efficient technology, energy efficient cultivation strategies. So it's not just about the technology, but also the choices you do in controlling the environment. Finding new cultivars for vertical farming and integrating that in the city metabolism. So this is what IKEA is doing. They have this very nice concept. It's a weird figure, but they are the 6th biggest food chain of the world. If you check, it's apparently true. So they want to produce all the vegetables that they serve in their restaurant. They want to produce them locally in vertical farming, and they want to reuse the organic waste to produce to give them to the nutrients to the plant, and so on and so forth. It's not easy, especially this step. But yeah, they're doing research. And potentially, you can also have other kind of output that could be integrated in urban metabolism. And to improve this efficiency, that's what is happening now in Wageningen in the project that has been granted by an NWO. So we are trying to make it much more efficient and improving also the quality through cultivation strategies. So follow the project because there are going to be exciting things over the course of the coming years. And thanks. It's finished.
Well, Michele, thank you. Thank you very much for this also critical note. I think it will deliver us a lot of knowledge about this. Are there questions from the public at the moment? If not, then we go to Kelly. Please come forward. Then afterwards we have some room to ask some more questions to all 3 speakers. So, please.
So, good evening. For now, we've seen a really broad view of many different ways of integrating vertical farming and food production with grand visions all over the world. And we've also seen in detail some systems on a technical standpoint. And today I want to talk you through one project in specific. So we're kind of zooming around in different scales, but maybe also gives a nice idea. So I would like to also just first introduce the company I work for, Makers of Sustainable Spaces. We are based in Amsterdam, and we work specifically to design green oases for the built environment. We work together with architects, developers, and in our team we have both of these, as well as landscapers, product designers, and we're looking for ideas how to integrate greenery into the built environment. We work with exterior projects for rooftops, but also interior projects, offices, hospitals, hotels, and so on. But today I'll show you specifically a project we did together with our sister company Herbs for urban farming. And if I just show you briefly this illustration we made, because we started questioning ourselves, what is the ideal building? And so we had to think about it a bit more extensively as what's then is the ideal built environment. And if you kind of start to look through some elements that you see here. So the obvious one is food production. That's a key point. But it's the distribution, it's the proximity, it's the integration, it's the combination with also green infrastructure and ecosystem services provided directly in or on your building. It's about collecting rainwater, organic compost, back and again. Also the proximity to the market. So instead of transporting your food with diesel, is it also possible to transport your food by bicycle or by foot? And then if we see on the right there, we see more of a workplace where you actually have a biophilic office where you work in a really green area. How does that make you feel? Does that make you more productive? Does it make you have less sick days? Does it make you want to be at work? But then if we go on to the next part, sorry, the slide's only so big. But then also what do we give back to our microclimate, to our environment? Are we able to cool the microclimate? Do we add habitats for biodiversity and so on? So this is kind of the zoomed out view of what we do, but I want to show you in specific, like I promised, one project. Has anyone, I know one person, has anyone else been to this restaurant in Utrecht? Okay, 2, 3, all right. So I want to tell you a story about this restaurant. It has seats for 150 people. It's located at the back of the Utrecht Central Station. And it was built about 1.5 years ago. This restaurant has, as you see, its own urban farm. And it also has meeting rooms, an outdoor garden, and a terrace as well. This project is unique because it's built entirely for circularity. Actually, what you see there is a completely dismountable pavilion. From now in 13 years, it will be dismounted. But more than that, all the materials that you see in this building, well, good majority of them are actually reclaimed from the building which stood on the site, the Knoopkazerne, before this building took up that site. So the glass panels you see were actually the old office windows. The floor tiles in the farm were also like the sidewalk tiles. Inside the restaurant, the wall panels are old doors. So everything is in one way or another reincorporated back into the building. But more than that, the products inside this building are not purchased by suppliers. They are rented or they are operated on a pay-per-use subscription. So that means that Albron does not actually own this urban farm. But how is it possible then that 3 tons of edible green is supplied to this restaurant in just 80 square meters year-round in the heart of the Netherlands? It's a pretty small space to have such a big output. And actually, it doesn't start there. The food is not grown on site at the greenhouse restaurant. It is actually grown in the periphery of the city. And that is carried out by the sister company I mentioned before, Herbs, and also now in partnership with Plant Lab to produce food in these specific modular growing units, which is a growing tray. You can see on the right, in this illustration, that nice lady, she's got one in her hand. But once those trays are grown and ready, they are then delivered on site. Those trays are then stacked inside the urban farm at the restaurant, and they're ready to go. It's really like a plug and play system. So those trays also fit into the outdoor garden as well in the indoor garden. They're stacked into these Danish carts, as we call them, complete with light solution and also for irrigation to reduce the maintenance. So now there are about 40 crop varieties. It's a mix of leafy greens, microgreens, cresses, edible flowers, some small fruits and vegetables. And throughout the year, for each growing season, Herb sits together with the chef to tailor the crops for the menu. All organic matter from the kitchen is then composted back in the back garden. That's then used for the outdoor garden. And you have to imagine that with the steady harvest in the farm, those trays are then soon empty. But that's when Herbs comes in again to bring back the used tray back to the nursery to compost whatever organic matter is left, to wash the tray, and to grow again. Again and again and again. So the greenhouse has something like 600 trays in circulation. Now there are around 10,000 trays in North Holland moving around. So they're coming in, they're coming out. And you have to think with restaurant-supported agriculture, it's not ideal for the chefs to be responsible for farming. They have other things on their mind. And so with this subscription, you're inviting other partners to also take responsibility and to team up, to commit to the success of the project. So now what you see here is this urban farm, which supplies about 50% of the edible leafy matter to the kitchen. And let's see. It's fully accessible if you would like to visit. It's open, you can walk upstairs and take a look. You can see how the trays work, how they fit in. They rest on a simple water basin and the grow lights above. So this is a very basic system to keep the plants happy for as long as they will be harvested. But after all, they will be replenished when they're ready. So I believe the success in this project comes from its circularity, from its pay-per-use, and from really sharing the responsibility through multiple partners to commit to the success in the project. Thanks.
It's a smart business model. Why do you grow the plants, the seedlings, in a controlled environment? Fully controlled environment, I mean, not a greenhouse.
So you mean, why do we grow off-site in a controlled environment?
Yeah, you go outside, but from the description it seems that you grow within the environment, just artificial light.
That is true now. It used to not be.
Okay. So you find that it's more viable to do the production of the seedlings and the first stages of the plant within a controlled environment and not within a greenhouse?
Absolutely. Yeah. But what's also important to us is the vicinity of the nursery to the project. So now that we have projects throughout the Netherlands, we have more than one grower. We have more than one growing facility. So it's not all the same, but we're definitely working towards more PPU, controlled environment system to have more controlled output, 365 days a year, spring, less bugs, less input. Yeah.
Could you elaborate a bit, maybe a bit more, why this is the next step from the greenhouse, which is totally separate? The main idea why to transport, still you have quite a lot of transport.
Yeah.
Why not bringing the plants?
In this case, it's a matter of space. So to generate, I don't have like the exact mathematical equation for how much space we would need to seed everything that we supply to that kitchen, but you would probably need around, a good 500 square meters at least. And that simply was not available on the site. And also it requires a lot more manual attention, if not, then technical involvement. And with the scale, the timeline of this project, that it is only open for 15 years, it just wasn't really the right step to build that technology specifically for this project on that site, because it will be taken down. But yeah, in the vicinity of that project, where there's the usable space that can also generate those plants for other projects as well. So you get kind of more than one use to spread also the production around. True. Do you cook? And have you ever harvested your own for your meal? It's pretty cool, right? There's something really special about harvesting. It's quite a sacred moment in the eating process. And the chefs that we work with there, they get really excited that they can literally walk upstairs and make their harvest for the meal for that day. Not to mention the freshness, the purity, the less packaging. Also, since these are grown organically, without pesticides. Yeah, but also for the taste, because when you harvest something directly, there's no doubt that it tastes better than being harvested in another country and brought to you with refrigeration and the experience. Yeah, when you look at it in that regards, there's no doubt. Yeah, so it's really what you want. And for Albron, they wanted to create a pavilion, and they wanted to create an experience and something that people can also see and feel. And it's really open to anyone. So if someone's curious about, how can food production be in my built environment, it's not always possible to visit something that's actually working and that's actually used. Like a pilot. Yeah, so actually Herbs, they supply these growing trays for all sorts of individuals, for companies, for bars, for restaurants. And they tailor that for anyone who wants that experience. So this is on a bigger scale. This is seen for how we can actually supply food on a restaurant scale, but it's also possible for an office canteen, for a bar with fresh herbs in their cocktails. So it's definitely a vision to see how it can be adapted for different sorts of scales, different sorts of clients, and to scale it up. Oh, so that site is a very expensive site. And it's, I think I see it as sort of a real estate placeholder. So it's sitting there waiting for a big price tag. Yeah. But who knows? Maybe they want to keep it longer, or maybe this will be moved to another location. Thanks for all the questions. Let me know if you have something else.
been talking about, and to see if we can, please step forward if you will. Because if we listen to the stories, you, Jago, your story was, what I found from it was basically more two sides. One where you had the more smaller scale and social projects that you talked about, and the designs that you make really for food production companies. And maybe you can elaborate a bit more on how you can incorporate and how you think about to incorporate that into the city. Because to me it looks still, especially the buildings you make for the production companies, it looks big and it's tailored to production. But, and also if you listen to Tela, that's more the idea of how it could be appropriated more on units in the city. Why do we need it actually? That's maybe my question in the city. Why do we need it? Yeah.
I think, let's say what, considering the larger companies, they are looking for now for opportunities in the city. So, instead of IKEA, IKEA has a large production open up in our city store. And if your restaurant would come also with your biodigester and your proper box, it simply starts to invade the city. So you think about how can you do it and implement it or integrate it in a meaningful way, so that you do not indeed end up with a container somewhere on the roof, but that it adds to the quality of the city, to the green quality of the city, but also architecture. So I think it's in that sense also a type of experience, experiencing nice architectural development with people. It's also the experience of the city itself. Bigger companies are simply looking for the city, so they will come. As far as it goes for investors of the city, it's also something that is in their mind. Their interest lies in the space, and they are free to harvest yourself.
Is it possible to combine the two?
In the large scale, all things is working well. So they have actually associated also material buckets, so it's a social housing, which is a regular architecture project. They have a partner funded by two clients in Europe and RUIMTELIKE. And I mean, it won't keep them year round. So it's for the place, for the experience, it's nice. And they have a social and we hope also that the final development that it will add to the social impact of more tech community. It will add another quality. So if you indeed how food quality to harvest your sample on the 16th floor on the 16th floor. But this is experience. And it's value.
And lastly, I'm just trying to get at this, the large scale production. Because you use the example you showed with the small scale production. Well, yeah, sorry, yeah. I'm on. Yeah, I'm on. I'm not. Yeah. Sorry about that. I also heard you have the critical notes, and thank you for that. And
I'm not just critical, eh?
No, well,
I like it very much.
That's my.
I want to be honest.
That was my question to you. Why are you still driven to work on it? Maybe we can go to that later on. But the large scale production of food, because I can we can imagine, I think, the smaller scale, and also for the office workers and the green in the office as a very beneficial. But is there should we also have the vertical farms, the big scale production in the city? Do you see a future for that? And why do we need that? That's what I mean. Maybe I'm not. Maybe someone can help me figure this out.
I think Herbs also has a business plan that will grow in the future. So it will not. You will not stay with 3,000 tons a year. I think so. In the end, it will grow. But I think it depends also on what you define about what the city is. So in Holland, we are in the lucky position that actually our cities are very small but close to each other with a lot of space in between. So actually, we do not have this kind of huge problems with our food production. We have the best quality for the lowest price, 24/7 available. So we have nothing to complain here. But in other cities, like, well, the cities that I've showed you, where we also are building, there is really quite some problems with the food logistic part and access to healthy food. So I think it could be a solution there. Yeah.
That was also, of course, part of your story.
Yeah.
Holland and the place we are here can contribute to this educational and we gather and gain and sell this.
Yeah, and at the same time you also have to be, that's my critical note, be very aware of what you're doing, because the Kofco city I showed you, which is now under construction, actually for a long time we designed it also in such a way that we were really had the idea that 60,000 people that are going to live there will be working and eating from this. Eventually, what happens is that Kofco is actually growing its food there for the luxury clubs in Beijing. And the people that are working there getting their food, well, God knows where from. So I was also, you have to be, you have to be critical in that sense as well, or critical, and you have to be aware of that there isn't a catch in that sense. But still, let's say there's a lot of need for technologies that can improve situations, like in these larger metropolis of over, well, let's say 10 million plus. Yeah.
Is it answered already, or?
A bit. I just really have the feeling that it's a lot of solutions for a problem that isn't really there. It's really first world problems, and it's luxury. It's an extra thing we can all have, and of course it looks nice. And it
So you're absolutely right. There's not really like a one solution fits all, especially when you have so many different questions you're asking. Like, what's the aim? Is it for an experience of food? Is it for cheaper food? Is it for healthier food? Is it for social benefits? Because those are totally different. Yeah, you're totally different outcomes, different systems, different technologies, different prices. Yeah, each one is a totally different project. But I think if you look in places where you have food deserts, or you have food insecurities, or you have food which is exorbitantly expensive, in Reykjavik, I saw a bag of spinach for €9. So in those kind of situations, you can think, yeah, then vertical farming is going to make an economic case because it's being shipped from all over the world and it's packaged and it's refrigerated and all of these things. But we should think then back to the first question, what do we want food to do for this location?
Maybe, yeah.
And your comment is full. I agree with that, but there is also this technology allows you to year-round production without contamination, independent from the climate externally. So if you think about this advantage and you project yourself in 30 years from now, you have a different scenario that the one we have. Maybe the weather, we don't know what's going to happen with the weather, and we don't care if we have a vertical farm. So it's very cynical to say, but if it's a sort of like technology that is also, will success depend on the fact that climate change is certain. So yeah, you're right. Now it will be better to improve the regular agriculture. Regular, that is also already very your greenhouse. Yeah.
What are the criteria between vertical and traditional greenhouse? Only construction costs are going up, logistic costs versus and electricity. What are the for traditional greenhouse? You can also do no pesticides, totally automatic.
Well,
but then so what is it? What is it dependent on? Is it the electricity price and the cost of building up versus going solid waste? What is the trade-off there? Why not just build another greenhouse next to each other, like we do here?
That's also what is happening all around the world. Like but they are really the amount of greenhouse that are building. It's amazing. Like it's incredible. So that's also. Yeah, well, the greenhouse still has a connection with the outside world because you have to ventilate sometimes, and you still rely on weather patterns. You can compensate with artificial light, and then you start to become a plant factory again, a vertical farm again. So with vertical farm, you can really get rid of the climate, and indeed. The need of vertical farming is very location specific. It's not one solution fits all. There are just some places, food deserts, very rich places in which the water is very contaminated, the soil is very contaminated or full of salt, places with very scarce labor. And the lack of a business framework that is because it's not it's very difficult to understand also if a location is suitable because there are many factors to consider. So it's now we are in a phase of imagination, research, experimenting. It's prototyping basically. It's not I don't sell it as like personally as a certain solution that will solve your problems. It's a technological concept that has a lot of potential. If this potential is actually something, well, we will see.
Thank you for that. Yeah, Monica.
image was lying all around, and the much more controlled version, which is then basically a black box, which is not so interesting.
Yeah. So the distinction between the super high tech, which is dark, which is in a container.
Exactly. I have the idea that that's basically what you just said. So if it's totally controlled and it's the total black box, it's actually better. But architectonically, it's much nicer if it's the greenhouse. But what is the best solution for the food? I don't know. So I don't know who to ask this.
I don't think that for the food. Okay, well, for the food, there is research that we are trying to understand what's changing under LED light, and it seems that the shelf life is longer. You can steer better the quality of the food according to the color of the light. But I consider this marginal improvement. So there are significant, statistically significant improvement, but yeah, it's I agree with you architectonically, and that's also something that they often ask. Also, the people of IKEA are trying to imagine all possible way to open a little window and show what's going on inside, because in this way you build a relation with the community or the users and so on and so on. A solution they found in Square Roots in New York, the company founded by the brother of Elon Musk. They periodically have tours. They have a plexiglass wall that they open twice a week. They bring the people to watch. So there is a sort of interaction, and then they close it again. But yeah, it's indeed limited aesthetically. The closed box is still something that has to be solved, like how we make these as the nice experience that they offer in Herbs. Because for now, what they offer in Herbs is an added value. But if we imagine the city of tomorrow, in which there are too many people, too much concrete, and so on and so on, from an added value, it starts to be just compensating the problem of the lack of nature, things like that. So we're not anymore talking about the niche, but we are talking about a basic, compensating the lack of green around you.
Yeah. Why not? So in a van or in a ship or one, yeah.
On the city scale, it takes about 18 days from seed to harvest in a fully controlled environment. So perhaps overseas or something, but that's something I don't have experience in. But on the city scale, 18 days, better to have it just stagnant. Yeah, closer. Kalai. It's okay. That's definitely the idea, to create food stability by releasing the technology to the places that need it the most. Then they can grow anywhere. And it's, Monica, to your question, it's just more control. Because when you have that complete closed black box, you control the light, you control the air, you control the water, you can plan everything. You can choose if you want more output or more or less. You can control the taste, you can control the texture. It's just, it's the control freak's dream for food production.
Okay. Well, let's go to 2 more questions, and then I'll try to give a sort of wrap up or of this evening. Please go ahead.
Well, I'm curious about your talking about the data. That's the output that a lot of big companies have. There's also a lot of power that you have. Are there also new business model, more open source models, or different ways to make it more, for people that don't have the capital or the power, the money, started on their own? Are there new business models also developing?
More social models, you mean?
More social models, but also you want something to help them grow. So a lot of people can work on it.
Well, so I don't know much about it first, but I know that the many companies are really believing that and that indeed the amount of data they are gathering will turn a profit. Indeed, it's no doubt. It's not a mystery that indeed it's not. It doesn't surprise that Bezos supported SoftBank, invested in plenty. That Google is behind Bowery. That Ocado is behind John's Food Company. So all companies relying on big data, they are behind many vertical farms. There are initiatives also because the hacker scene is like the people behind data. There are many current, so there are also someone that are more give everything to everyone. There is an unfortunate story that made the news recently, the one of the Open Agriculture Initiative. They were doing that. They were trying to build a community of shared knowledge, and but then this the Epstein scandal that involved the Media Lab collapsed on the whole media MIT, and then this sub part of the MIT Media Lab, the Open Agriculture Initiative, got involved in another scandal of allegation about basically the capabilities of their devices that were much less than reality. And it didn't surprise anyone in the vertical farming industry, but it surprised the audience, the general public of the New York Times, for example. So there are initiatives, there are on movement, and probably from the, from the ashes of the Open Agriculture Initiative, there will be some other people, like for example, Grow Computer is a company that was born, it's still a startup, was born out of some people that left back 2 or 3 years ago, the Open Agriculture Initiative, and there is still this energy around, but historically, also if you watch the web, the phenomena that were open source versus the phenomena that were not, Google is not, Amazon is not, eBay is not, Wikipedia is. So there are much more companies and that in that environment that rely on owning the data. So if in the growing industry, fruit growing industry, we will have managed to have an open source community, I don't know. But if you base your judgment on history, the answer is no. Or you will have minor initiatives that are still good. Wikipedia is great. Yeah.
Well, well, thank you. That's I wouldn't want to say a grim note, because I don't think so, because I think we saw a lot of very positive developments. At least I think what I learned, and I hope some of you also learned, that we are a long way off yet, because we read a lot about it in the news, but I think with the examples we've seen, we've learned a lot that what is possible and still what is not. As an architect, I'm also quite positive that for us there's still a lot to do. You sketched it, you are doing it as well. There's a lot to do to incorporate it, and maybe MVH is a place where the direct experience of the food garden that we see there can be incorporated, and in a vertical farm where the same sort of, well, maybe the more romantic notion that I started with, this bird, can be combined actually. That will be, of course, a dream that I think many people of us share, and maybe we will see it happen. And well, on that note, maybe we will conclude this evening. Thank you very much for sharing your knowledge and the examples, and thank you for coming on this rainy night. And hope to see you next week. Thanks. Have a drink at the bar.